My name is Ethan Miller, and I am 16 years old living in Ohio, and I never imagined I would be the one telling this story. But some moments change how you see family forever, and once that happens, you cannot unsee it. My dad always said, family is supposed to protect you, not drain you. And for a long time, I did not understand what he meant, until the Thanksgiving that shattered everything. My grandfather was the strongest person I knew. Not loud, not flashy, just solid. He worked most of his life running a small repair business, and when he retired, he moved near a lake and lived simply, fishing, reading, and fixing things for neighbors. He helped my parents more than anyone I know, and he never complained. My parents lived in a big house in a nice neighborhood, a house my grandfather bought for them when they were struggling. He paid the mortgage, the bills, even groceries sometimes. He said it was temporary, but temporary turned into years. My mom liked expensive things, designer bags, spa days, fancy dinners, and she always said she deserved them because life was stressful. My dad never argued. He just stayed quiet. I think he learned that silence was easier than conflict. But silence has a cost. I saw it every time my grandfather came over. He would call first, then wait in his truck, sometimes before knocking, like he was afraid to interrupt his own family. That always bothered me. Thanksgiving was supposed to be our tradition. Every year, my grandfather cooked everything: turkey, stuffing, pies, all of it. He loved it, said feeding people was his way of showing love. That year, he came early with bags of food, filling the back of his old pickup. I was in my room when I heard my mom yelling. I came downstairs and saw her standing at the door, arms crossed, face tight. She told him he was not welcome this year. She said he ruined holidays, that he was old and embarrassing, and that they were celebrating their way now. My grandfather did not yell back. He just stood there, holding a grocery bag, and smiled softly like he was letting go of something heavy. I looked at my dad, waiting for him to say something, anything, but he just stared at his phone and walked away. I wanted to scream. My grandfather set the bags down carefully, like they mattered more than he did. Then he left. I watched from the window as he drove away, and something inside me broke. That night, he did not call, he did not text, and the next morning, everything changed. The house felt different, colder, quieter. My mom was angry, pacing around, checking her phone. My dad looked confused, stressed, like he had lost something he could not name. By afternoon, the power went out. Then my mom started yelling about the bank app not working. She kept refreshing her phone over and over. Then she screamed my grandfather's name like he had stolen something from her. That was when I realized how much he had been doing for us, without us ever noticing. Mortgage, insurance, utilities, credit cards, all gone just like that. My dad tried calling him nonstop. No answer. My mom drove to his house and came back furious, said he would not open the door. She said he was being childish, but her voice shook, and I knew she was scared. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how someone can give everything and still be treated like nothing. And I wondered what kind of person that made us. The next morning, an envelope arrived from a law office, and when my dad opened it, his hands started shaking, because in that moment, we learned the truth about the house and about who really owned our lives. And as I stood there, watching my parents panic, I realized this was only the beginning, because when my grandfather finally spoke again, nothing would ever be the same. And what he did next forced all of us to choose sides. The envelope sat on the kitchen table like it was alive. My dad read it twice, then a third time, slower, like the words might change if he looked hard enough. My mom kept asking what it said over and over until he finally told her the house was not theirs. Not really. It had always been in my grandfather's name. The payments he made were not help, they were ownership. And the letter explained that, effective immediately, all financial support had ended, utilities, insurance, and mortgage access revoked. My mom laughed at first, a sharp, nervous laugh, and said that was impossible because family does not do that to each other. But her laugh faded when the lights stayed off and her phone showed declined on every card. My dad sank into a chair and rubbed his face, like he was waking up from a bad dream. He said his father would never do this, but I knew better because I saw the look on my grandfather's face the night he was turned away. That was not anger. That was final. My mom spent the rest of the day calling relatives, friends, anyone who might help, but nobody wanted to get involved. Some said they were sorry. Others said they could not take sides. She called my grandfather again and again, leaving voicemails that switched from apology to accusation. She said he was selfish, cruel, manipulative. She said he was punishing the family over one misunderstanding. But I remembered her words at the door and how calm he stayed while being erased that evening. My dad finally drove me to my grandfather's house. The sun was setting and the lake looked still, like it was holding its breath. We parked and walked up to the door. My dad knocked once, then again, slower this time. The door opened and my grandfather stood there. He looked tired, but lighter, like someone who finally set something down. My dad started talking right away, apologizing, explaining, saying he never meant for things to go that far. My grandfather listened quietly, then looked at me and smiled. He asked how school was, how basketball was, how my knee was after the last game. He remembered everything. Then he looked back at my dad and said, "I warned you years ago that love cannot survive entitlement." He said, helping is not the same as being used. And I stayed silent because this was not my fight, but it was my lesson. My dad said he would fix it, that my mom did not mean what she said. My grandfather nodded and said, intent does not erase impact. He said, when someone shows you who you are to them, believe them. He explained that the house would be sold and they would have 60 days to leave. My dad went pale. He said, where are we supposed to go? My grandfather said, you will figure it out, the way I always had to figure things out, alone. There was no yelling, no insults, just truth, and somehow that hurt more. On the drive home, my dad did not speak. My mom exploded when she found out. She threw things, shouted, said my grandfather was dead to her. She blamed my dad for being weak, blamed me for not defending her. She said family loyalty meant standing by her no matter what. But I was tired of pretending wrong was right. That night, I packed a bag and went back to my grandfather's house. I did not ask, I just showed up. He opened the door and hugged me tight, and for the first time in weeks, I felt safe. My parents called nonstop, but I did not answer, because some bridges need distance before they can be rebuilt, and others need to burn so something better can grow. And as I sat by the lake, listening to the water move, my grandfather told me there was more I did not know about the past, about promises broken and money taken without asking. And when he said the next thing, my blood ran cold, because the house was only the beginning of what he was taking back. Living with my grandfather felt like stepping into a different world. Mornings were quiet. No shouting, no phones buzzing with complaints, just coffee brewing and the sound of the lake moving against the dock. He treated me like a person, not a burden, and that alone changed something in me. After a few days, he finally told me the rest of the story, the part nobody ever talked about. He said when my parents first got married, they were drowning in debt. Credit cards, student loans, bad investments. My grandfather sold a piece of land he had planned to retire on and paid everything off. He bought the house outright so they could start fresh, but the agreement was simple. They would take over payments slowly and learn to stand on their own. That never happened. Every time he brought it up, there was an emergency, a vacation, a new car, something they deserved. And every time he gave in because he believed love meant sacrifice. Over time, the house was refinanced without his knowledge. His savings were drained little by little under the excuse of family support. He said he ignored the red flags because admitting the truth would mean admitting his own son was using him. Hearing that made my chest hurt because I loved my dad, but I could not deny what I had seen. My grandfather said the Thanksgiving incident was not about dinner, it was about respect. He said the moment he was told he did not belong in the home he paid for, something snapped, not in anger, but in clarity. He met with a lawyer the next morning and started reclaiming everything tied to his name: accounts, vehicles, even the small business he had quietly funded for my dad years ago. I asked him if he felt guilty. He shook his head and said, "Guilt is what keeps people trapped." He said boundaries are not punishment, they are protection. Meanwhile, back at my parents' house, chaos had fully settled in. My dad lost access to the business accounts and could not make payroll. My mom tried selling jewelry online, but nobody was buying fast enough. Foreclosure notices arrived, along with overdue bills and collection calls. I heard all of this through angry voicemails they left me, telling me to convince my grandfather to stop, that he was destroying the family. But from where I stood, the family had been broken long before this. They just never noticed because the money kept things quiet. One night, my dad showed up at the lake, alone. He looked older, smaller. He asked if he could talk to me. We sat on the dock and he finally admitted everything. He said he knew it was wrong, but he was scared of disappointing my mom, scared of conflict, scared of losing comfort. He said he thought it would never end. I asked him why he did not stand up for my grandfather on Thanksgiving, and he did not answer right away. Then he said because doing so would mean choosing, and he chose wrong. Hearing that hurt, but it was honest, and honesty felt like the first real step toward anything better. My grandfather did not come out that night. He let us talk alone, and when my dad left, he told me he was proud of me for seeing the truth early. He said strength is not about control, it's about walking away when something costs you your self-respect. The next week, the house went on the market. My parents were given a final deadline, and my mom started telling everyone my grandfather was abusive and heartless. But people were starting to ask questions. Stories do not survive when facts catch up. And just when things could not get worse, my grandfather received a call that would force all of us into the same room again, for the first time since Thanksgiving. And what was said there would decide whether this family could ever be repaired or completely erased. The call came on a rainy afternoon. My grandfather listened quietly, then hung up and stared out the window for a long time. He told me there was going to be a family meeting, required by the lawyer, because some assets were tied together and signatures were needed. He said everyone would be there: my parents, my aunt, even my grandmother, who had stayed silent through everything. My stomach twisted at the thought of sitting in the same room again, but part of me wanted it. I wanted the truth to be said out loud. The meeting took place in a small law office downtown, the kind with beige walls and a ticking clock that makes every second feel heavier. My parents arrived together, but did not sit close. My mom wore sunglasses even though we were indoors. My dad looked exhausted. When my grandfather walked in, the room went quiet. The lawyer began explaining documents, timelines, and responsibilities, but my mom interrupted almost immediately. She accused my grandfather of manipulation, emotional abuse, and control. She said he used money to dominate everyone. Her voice shook, but it was sharp. She said he was ruining his own family. My grandfather did not raise his voice. He waited until she finished, then calmly asked if she remembered the night she told him he was not welcome in his own house. She said that was different, that emotions were high. He nodded and said, "Dignity is not seasonal." The lawyer continued, outlining the sale of the house, the return of remaining funds, and the separation of business assets. My dad finally spoke. He said he wanted to fix things, that he would work 2 jobs if needed, that he would make things right. My grandfather looked at him and said, "Fixing things requires truth first." He asked my dad to admit that he had known about the refinancing and the money transfers. The room went silent. My dad swallowed hard and nodded yes. My mom turned toward him in shock and screamed that he was lying, but the bank records were already on the table, printed and undeniable. Something in my mom snapped. She stood up and said if this was how it was going to be, then she would take my grandfather to court. She said she would tell everyone he was abusive, controlling, toxic. My grandmother finally spoke for the first time. Her voice was quiet but firm. She said enough. She said she had watched her husband give until there was nothing left, and she was done watching him be blamed for it. She said love does not mean entitlement, and family does not mean unlimited access to someone else's life. My mom burst into tears. Real or strategic, I could not tell. The lawyer concluded the meeting by setting deadlines and reminding everyone that further communication would go through legal channels. As we left, my dad stopped my grandfather and asked if there was any chance of forgiveness. My grandfather said forgiveness is not the same as trust, and trust must be rebuilt, not demanded. Outside the building, my mom yelled that I had chosen sides. She said I betrayed her. I wanted to respond, but my grandfather placed a hand on my shoulder and said, "Sometimes choosing yourself feels like betrayal to those who benefited from your silence." We walked away together, and that night, he told me he was proud again, not because I took his side, but because I did not lie to protect comfort. Weeks passed, the house sold quickly, my parents moved into a small apartment. My dad started rebuilding from nothing, and my mom grew bitter, quieter, less certain. Her control was slipping. And then one evening, a message came through my phone from my mom that made my heart race, because she was asking to meet alone, and what she said she wanted to tell me could change everything I thought I knew about the past. I stared at my phone for a long time before answering. My mom had asked to meet just the two of us. No lawyers, no yelling, just coffee. She said there were things I needed to know, things she had protected me from. Every part of me wanted to ignore it, but another part wanted answers, so I agreed. We met at a small diner off the highway, the kind with cracked booths and burnt coffee. She looked different, smaller somehow, like the anger that fueled her had burned out. She did not waste time. She told me she had grown up poor, really poor, always watching other kids have things she could not. She said when she married my dad, she promised herself she would never feel that powerless again. When my grandfather helped them at first, she felt grateful, but gratitude turned into fear. Fear of losing comfort, fear of going back to nothing. She admitted she pushed my dad to ask for more every time, and when my grandfather hesitated, she convinced herself he was judging her, controlling her. She said Thanksgiving was the moment everything she had buried came out. She wanted to feel powerful for once, and instead, she burned everything. She asked if I hated her. I told her I was hurt. She nodded and said that was fair. She said she did not expect forgiveness, but she wanted me to understand that she never meant to hurt me. That was the first time she said my feelings mattered, and it hit me how rare that had been. We sat in silence for a while, then she said something that made my chest tighten. She said the refinancing years ago was her idea, and my dad had resisted at first, but she wore him down. She said she told him it was temporary, just to get ahead. She said she never planned for it to end like this. I believed her, but belief did not erase damage. When we stood to leave, she hugged me and whispered that she was sorry, not just for Thanksgiving, but for all the time she chose control over care. I walked out feeling heavier, but clearer. When I told my grandfather about the meeting, he listened carefully, then said understanding does not require reconciliation. He said compassion can exist without reopening doors. He told me my mom was a product of her fears, but fear does not excuse harm. Weeks later, my dad came by the lake again. He said he and my mom were separating. Not dramatic, just tired. He said he was learning how to live without shortcuts, without someone else paying the price. He thanked my grandfather for cutting him off. He said it saved him from becoming someone he did not recognize. That was the first time I saw my dad stand fully on his own, and I respected him for it. Life slowly found a new rhythm. School, basketball, quiet dinners by the water. My grandfather laughed more, traveled a little, volunteered fixing things for people who appreciated it. One night we sat by the fire and he told me he was updating his will. He said he wanted to make sure the future was built on respect, not obligation. I did not ask what that meant, but I felt the weight of it. And then, just when things seemed settled, a letter arrived, addressed to me. Not my parents, not my grandfather, but me. And when I opened it, I realized my grandfather had made a decision that would change my life in a way I never expected. The letter felt heavier than paper should. My name written carefully across the front like it mattered. My grandfather watched me open it without saying a word. Inside was a copy of a trust document and a handwritten note in his steady, familiar writing. He said he had been thinking a lot about legacy, not money, but impact. He said he had seen what unchecked support had done to my parents, and he refused to repeat that mistake. He told me the trust was not a gift, but a responsibility. It would help with college, housing, and emergencies, but only under conditions tied to effort, accountability, and integrity. He wrote that he trusted me, not because I was perfect, but because I had shown the courage to stand still when everything around me was shaking. My hands trembled as I read it. I was 16, and suddenly the future felt real, not scary, just real. My grandfather said this was not about choosing favorites, it was about choosing values. He said I was proof that cycles could end if someone was willing to stop them. I did not know what to say, so I hugged him, and that was enough. News travels fast in families, even broken ones. My mom found out first. She called crying, saying she was happy for me, then angry, saying it was unfair. My dad called later, quieter. He said he understood. He said maybe this was how things were meant to be. That night I lay awake thinking about how money had twisted everyone I loved and how careful I needed to be not to let it twist me too. Months passed. My parents finalized their separation. My mom moved closer to her sister and started working for the first time in years. She was different, still sharp, but less demanding. My dad stayed in the apartment, rebuilding slowly. Honestly, we talked more than we ever had before, and for the first time, he listened. School ended, I got accepted into a college out of state, and when I told my grandfather, he smiled like he had been waiting for that moment. He said, "Go see who you are without all this noise." Before I left, we visited the old house one last time. It was empty now, stripped of furniture and memories that never really belonged to us. My grandfather stood in the doorway for a moment, then turned away without regret. As we drove back to the lake, he told me something I will never forget. He said, "Generosity without boundaries is self-destruction, and boundaries without compassion are cruelty. Balance is everything." I carry that with me every day now. When people ask about my family, I tell them the truth, not the dramatic version, just that we learned the hard way that love must be chosen freely, not bought, demanded, or inherited. And just when I thought the story was finally over, my grandfather asked me one last question that stopped me cold, because the way I answered it would decide whether I truly learned the lesson or was about to repeat the same mistake all over again.